Welcome to View from the Top. I'm David Wohl, here with Ken Aldrich, co-founder and chairman of the board of International Stem Cell Corporation. Ken, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ken, stem cell research is really on the cutting edge. What types of therapies is your company now developing?
Well, in theory, we are developing almost any kind of therapy, and the reason is that we have developed a new class of stem cells called parthenotes that can be differentiated, that's just the technical term for it, but that can make any stem cell or make a stem cell into any cell in the human body. So we can use our cells with researchers throughout the world theoretically to develop treatments for almost any disease that science is clever enough to figure out a way to use stem cells.
What about bioethical issues and how you deal with where your company gets the eggs from which you do your research?
We think we're at the very cutting edge of complying with ethical standards throughout the world for two reasons. One, unlike embryonic stem cells, which are derived from a fertilized human embryo, parthenogenic stem cells come from an unfertilized egg. So we take that whole issue of whether or not we're destroying human life off the table. The second part is we have, from the very beginning, even when we were doing early research in Russia, we were very, very careful to abide by all of the international standards for egg donation. We don't pay our donors, they're volunteers, and we're very, very careful about it.
You know, there's no more exciting type of research right now than stem cell research because you're looking at curing potentially diseases such as type 1 diabetes, Parkinson's disease, MS, a lot of the type of diseases that right now there's really no cure, there's just treatment for. What are your goals in that regard?
Well, our goal ultimately is to be the primary supplier of the cells that are needed for any kind of therapy that might be developed. Parthenotes can be changed into any cell that's needed. We can stand on the shoulders of 10 years of research in embryonic stem cells, but go a step further because the parthenogenic stem cells have the unique characteristic of being able to be matched to the immune systems of a very large group of people from a single cell line. In that, we're quite unique. And theoretically, there's no limit to the diseases that could potentially be treated with parthenogenic stem cells.
You're also working on products other than therapeutic stem cells. Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm glad you asked that because we are. I think we're one of the very few stem cell companies that actually has other businesses that are capable of generating revenue without waiting for many years for the FDA to approve. We're already one of the leaders in selling media and cell-based products to the research community. We have 70 or more different products that are sold to universities, to researchers in the government and elsewhere throughout the world. We are working on a skincare product that's based on stem cell technology. It won't be released until sometime late this year probably. And we're working on one thing that I think is very interesting, and that is we have developed a human cornea in the Petri dish. And one of the things we're experimenting with is whether we can use those corneas to substitute for the live rabbits that are now used to test pesticides and chemicals and so on. So if we're successful within the next year or two, we may save the lives of lots of small furry animals.
Human cornea, could that be for cornea replacement surgery as well?
Potentially for cornea replacement surgery as well. We have more work to do. The big market for that is overseas because in the U.S. there's a fairly good system for harvesting corneas from cadavers. Outside the U.S. that's almost non-existent. So there are more than 1 million people in China and India each that are blind from corneal damage or disease. And we're very much interested in that market. We have some work to do to prove whether we can do it or not.
Ken, what about government funding right now, grants, et cetera? How accessible is that to your firm?
It's not really accessible to us, and as a practical matter is not very accessible to most of the companies that are working in pluripotent stem cell research. Where it becomes important is that to the extent government funding is restricted to academic universities, or their access to government funding is restricted, it cuts down on the number of collaborations that we can have. So we would love to see more government funding. It would mean that we could do more work in the U.S. and less work outside the U.S., but it's not really affecting us in terms of bottom line strategies.
Well, that's very interesting. And having said that, what is your relationship right now with the FDA?
Well, it's very good. For therapeutic products, we're in the very, very early stages of planning our FDA approval process. So it involves early conversations and a lot of meetings, and we're in that work process or workflow. With the skincare products, the FDA involvement is minimal, so we will comply with all the regulations, but there's no formal pre-approval process. So it's good. The FDA is learning what they want to do about stem cells, and it's a work in process.
Ken, in closing, what do you see for the next 5 to 10 years in the life sciences industry?
Well, I can probably only speak to what I see in the stem cell arena, but we believe, and I think it will prove to be true, that the use of stem cells and cells derived from them is going to explode over the next 5 to 10 years. We're seeing things in our work, we're seeing things being done by other companies in the field that make me believe that we're going to have not 1 or 2 diseases, but many diseases that will be treatable with cells derived from pluripotent stem cells. They may not all be through the FDA in 5 years, but things will be well along the path.
Ken Aldrich, co-founder and chair of International Stem Cell Corporation, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on View from the Top.